Welcome back to 3 Ways to Build, a series where we take your Minecraft ideas and build them 3 different ways. Birch trees get a whole lot of hate. It really feels like people will find basically any excuse they can to just rag on the birch trees in the birch forest. Whether it's the wood color, or the leaf color, or the grass color, or the leaf texture, or the wood texture, or basically anything else they can possibly find. And I mean, I kinda get it, but birch trees are really cool. These guys get too much hate. We're going to be talking today about how to transform birch trees from these generic old vanilla trees into something beautiful and majestic like this tree behind me right here. But before we get to any of that, we've got to talk about the first of our 3 different kinds of birch trees, which is of course the basic version. And I've got 2 different builds for you guys actually. This one right here, which is frankly just a vanilla birch tree, and this over here, which is kind of just a weird hodgepodge of birch leaves and logs and stuff. And I think the reason that this one doesn't look too great is pretty obvious. There's no real creativity, there's no custom textures, there's no custom shapes. It is just, you put down a birch sapling. Wow. This, on the other hand, is a little bit more interesting. You at least had to construct this from scratch, but you can see that, you know, we're only using one type of wood block, we're only using one type of leaf block. There's one very important thing about birch logs, which is criminally underrated, that a lot of people don't take advantage of when building custom trees, and that's the fact that birch logs go really well with all these other really nice white textures. Yes, I just called diorite a nice texture. What are you gonna do about it, huh? But why stop at the logs? Let's get creative with our leaves as well. And here we've got a selection of 3 leaves. You can see the birch fits right in the middle between the lighter azalea and the darker spruce leaves. And if you want to throw in some solid blocks, which we'll get to in a little bit, I highly recommend moss or green concrete if you want something a little bit darker. But anyways, enough of this block palettes and color combinations and funky artsy stuff and whatever. Let's actually go and use these in a build. Let's go construct a massive, gargantuan, totally over-the-top birch tree and see what we come up with. You know, one funny thing I noticed about birch trees while finding some reference images for this build is that they often grow really tall and thin and in groves like this. So if you're wondering why this custom birch grove is so oddly shaped, I suppose, well, now you know why. I'll put up a couple images on screen so you can get a better idea of what I'm talking about. But yeah, this build turned out really well. I know that it's a little bit odd looking at it from the side here. I intended for this build to be best viewed strolling on through the birch grove, head up in the air, staring up at the canopy and the beautiful leaf work. Not to gas up my own build too much, but I think it turned out pretty well. And of course, the ground covering is nice with the moss and the flowers and whatnot. I think it's really cool how they tend to grow tall and thin like this without these huge, massive stumps. It's definitely not really what most people would imagine when they think of custom Minecraft tree, but I think it can work just as well. I really wanted to push myself with this build and make something as realistic to real life as possible, and of course that means sacrificing on the size and the scale and the grandeur a little bit, but I think that is totally fine. In terms of the blocks used, we're using the same block palette I was just talking about before, of course, with the wool and the birch and all that. We've also added in a little bit of mud here alongside the diorite at the bottom. And this is because in some of my reference images, I noticed that a lot of these birch trunks got kind of dirty and muddy at the bottom, which, you know, makes sense because they're right next to the ground. Looking back on it, it might have looked a little bit nicer to use moss here instead of mud, but I think this is the most realistic, and thus I went with mud. As for the leaf canopy, this is where the build really shines in my opinion. We've got the lighter azalea leaves towards the top here where the majority of the sunlight would be hitting the build, and then we've got these slightly darker normal birch leaves towards the bottom here. You can see down here it's majority birch. Having more than one different kind of leaf block in a custom tree, in my opinion, does wonders to make your build look a lot nicer. And then of course the decorations down on the forest floor, which are not exactly part of the birch tree, but as I was saying, we got the pink tulips, we got the moss, we got the peonies, we've even got a couple spore blossoms hidden inside these large birch trees right in the middle here. So this build is cool and all, and I definitely, really went out of my way to ramp up the realism here. But chances are when you're thinking about Minecraft custom trees, you don't really want to make a bunch of weird little stalks like this coming out of the ground. You want something that looks a little bit more like a tree, And well, I've got something in mind, and I can't wait to talk about it in a little bit more depth and detail with you guys as our balance build. Let's go check it out. Here we are back in our 3 ways to build flat world, and if you look behind me, there is our third and final birch tree of the video, the balanced one. The organic shapes look really wonderful as we have this thick trunk down at the bottom with a whole bunch of different roots branching out into the ground. Of course, it slowly thins out as we travel upwards, eventually branching out into smaller and smaller different stems as we reach the top canopy here. I'm using pretty much the same block palette here, just no mud. And the leaf pattern is a little bit more random, but I still think it looks pretty good. This build is definitely shaped a lot more like a traditional Minecraft custom tree, and I think that's really important. All in all, this build is a great middle ground between our basic vanilla trees and our insane custom birch grove biome that we just looked at. And of course, in typical 3 ways to build fashion, I would like to make a build tutorial for this here birch tree. However, unfortunately, I think that's gonna have to be done in another video because this build is quite large, and organic builds in general, especially custom trees, are quite difficult to make tutorials for, so I'm gonna have to do that in a separate video where I can really give this tree the proper attention to detail that it truly deserves. So with that being said, I think we're gonna have to end this video today. I know it's been a little bit of a short one, but I do really hope you enjoyed the birch trees that I've showed off today. If you did, a like on the video would be very much appreciated, and if you are not subscribed, consider doing that as well. Until next time, my dudes, this has been Leon, and keep your eyes peeled for the next custom birch tree tutorial coming soon. Take care, my dudes.